The last video for this week's site lectures is about positioning your project, both in relation to true north and also locating your project on Earth, where in fact it is located. Both of these are important when it comes to looking at sun angles and shadows on your project. Depending on where it is on the Earth and which way your building is pointing or orientated will depend on where the shadows land on your building or on your site throughout the year and throughout the different times of day. So once you start looking at sun settings and options, this is very important. So let's take a look at orientating your project correctly. So first of all, true north versus project north. These are two settings in Revit that you can find on your site plan. And if you look on the site plan, you can see the setting right here, the orientation. It's a toggle between true north and project north. Now the difference is if we set this view to true north, then north is pointing straight up the page. And if we change this to project north, this is what the direction is going to be on the sheet itself. So for instance, rarely does your building line up exactly to true north, but when you want to show a floor plan on your sheets, you want it to be exactly horizontal or exactly vertical on the sheet to make it easier to read and draw. So you have a project north for all your sheets, meaning that the building is orthogonal on the sheet. And you have true north, where north is straight up the page, and that's just a traditional architectural site plan nomenclature to keep north pointing up, and then the building would be angled to the correct orientation from there. So that's project north versus true north. So we're going to change the site plan to true north, and for right now, north is straight up the page. Now, I'm going to model a building, and I'm going to model this building with a point at the top so we can keep track of which way this building is actually pointing. So there we are. And it is right now pointing north. Now let's go back, and we've learned how to do this in the last video. We'll create some property lines, and we'll do this by sketching to begin with, and we'll just do it as a rectangle. So the settings we have are true north for our orientation for this view. And then we have some property lines. We can annotate those so we can keep track of where they are. We'll just do one. And we can see that it's 0 degrees east of north, which means it's pointing straight up. So this line is going straight north, and north is directly up on the page. And we have a building that's pointing north. So if this is the order in which we've done things, we've created a building, we've modeled the property lines in relation to the building, and we did that by sketching. Then we can change the direction of our property lines and our house. For instance, if our house actually doesn't point north, and in fact it actually points 45 degrees to the west of north in this direction. So what we need to do is rotate the view, and we do that in our manage tab here. So we'll go to manage, and then we want to go to the position drop down menu here, and we're going to rotate true north. And so what we're going to tell Revit is instead of the house pointing up to be north, we're going to point the house in the right direction as if we would find it in the real world, and north will still be straight up on the page. So it's just like the rotate command. We're going to click in one position. I always like to do it from straight up because that's north. And then I'm going to say by clicking again which direction or how many degrees of an angle the house should be away from north. And so like we had said, we're going to point the house to the west of north by 45 degrees. And when we did that, you can see that the elevation tags and the views, the property lines, everything stayed in a line And you can see that this no longer reads 0 degrees west of north, but it's now 45 degrees. So we changed everything in the project to be correctly angled in relation to north. We can do one last thing really quickly and draw one more property line just to make sure that this is still north being straight up. So if we tag that property line, we can see that it's 0 degrees east north, which means that it's going directly to the north. So again, we modeled the house, we sketched. It's important that you realize that we sketched those property lines. We didn't do it by table, and then we rotated it in relation to true north, making sure that our orientation for this view was set at true north. Now let's back up. What if we did this these property lines by a table, and we actually entered the distances and direction? You'll see the difference here. So I'm going to highlight this property line and I'm going to edit the table. So this is the same thing as if we created the table from the beginning. That warning basically said that once you go to modifying the property lines by table, you can't go back to sketching. And I said okay, and so here's the table, and you can see that has the distances and the bearings, what degree west of north or south each line is. And I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to change that from a sketch mode to a table mode. And now this is a table mode. You can see that we can no longer go back to sketching. We can just edit the table. Now let's rotate the building in relation to true north. Again, our view is set at true north. We're going to go to our Manage tab here, our Position drop-down menu, and we're going to rotate true north. Now the difference here is, now that these property lines have been modified or have been created by a table, Revit is going to keep those directions consistent. So when I rotate the true north, the building is going to change, but the property lines are going to stay the same way. So if you do property lines by sketching, they will rotate when you rotate the project from true north. And if you do the property lines by a table, they will actually stay the same. So let's do the exact same thing. We're going to rotate this. And again, this is not the rotate command. This was the rotate from true north command. So we'll go 45 degrees from north. And you can see that the property lines stayed straight up and down, even though the house rotated and the elevation markers. And you can see that the angle stayed at 0, 0. And that is the difference between sketching property lines and editing a table for property lines when you're rotating the project in relation to true north. And again, you can imagine that if north is now up here and it's hitting the side of this wall, as the sun comes around the south side of this building, the shadows will be different than if north was right at the top of this house. The second portion of this video is actually locating our building or our site, where in the earth it is. And so we can do that by going to this icon down here, the sun settings icon. And if we pick the top selection, the sun settings, we get this dialog box. And you can get shadows from different orientations, just a generic sunlight from the top right or top left and put the shadows where they are. But to be accurate, we're going to want to change the first setting to solar study, and we'll do a still study. And over here on the settings is where we will place not only where in the world it is, but the time that we want to see the shadows from. So right now we're looking at the location. So we'll click the radio button. And here you can type in an address or just a city, and then you can find it exactly on the map. So we could type in, let's see if we can go Miracosta Community College in Oceanside, California. And looks like it found it, so we'll zoom in. And this is close enough. If we move this thing to exactly where the building is, it won't make a big difference on our shadows. This little piece of land doesn't make that big of a difference in the grand scheme of things. But if you wanted to find out exactly where it is, you could zoom in, and I think our architecture building is. Let's see if you come up. Let's see. Yeah, if you come up this road, it's going to be right in this corner here. And so now this is where our project is located, and it's exactly on that earth. And it's as simple as that. And then Revit will give you the latitude and the longitude up here for it. And you hit OK, and now we're at the right place, and you can pick whichever time you want, the day of the year and the time of day. And all of these make a difference for shadows. Hit apply and you can hit OK. Now down here, we haven't seen any difference on this floor plan, but down here you could turn down here on your sun setting, you can turn the shadows. Sorry, it's actually this one right here next to the sun. You can turn the shadows on, and you can see that these are some really long shadows. Let's go back to our sun setting and see what time it was. So we set for 12 p.m., but it's in November, and so you have long shadows. If you change this to, say, in the middle of the summer, you can see that the shadows, because the sun is very high in the summer, the shadows get shorter. And you can work your way through this and take a look at how the shadows are going to look throughout the year, see where the shadows are going to be on the site. Or you can do this in elevation as well and see if you have shading devices on your building, if they're going to actually work, if they're going to put a shadow on the window where you want them during the summer, and no shadows on the window during the winter, so it can get warm inside. The last thing we'll take a look at in regards to all of this is the sun study. So this time we will go to the sun icon, and we'll turn the sun path on. And let's do this in 3D view. Makes a little more sense. We'll go back to the sun path on. And this is asking, do you want to use the current settings or use the specified project location, date, and time? So we're going to use that. So this is, we use the setting that is in Oceanside at November at the time that we had selected. So let's turn the shadows on, and you can see. So this is a very handy tool. So this shows you on November 6th, it can show you where the sun path will be. Show you how far south of east the sun will rise and set. And then you can grab this sun and drag it through. And change the shadows as it works its way around. And as you change the date, you can see how in the summertime it's much higher, and it rises and sets north of the east-west line. And then again, if you change this, if you're looking at that sun angle in June, if you change this back to November, you can see that it's much lower in the sky. And that's the sun setting. And again, this is very important to orientate the building correctly and locate it on Earth correctly for all these shadows to work.